We work with a dental group called Great Lakes Dental Partners. And within less than 100 days, we were able to show a 53% increase in productivity.
So what was that percentage?
53%.
Time savings.
Time savings, correct.
If you're comfortable, you're not growing. Welcome to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I am the CEO of SMC National. We provide predictable new patient flow for offices just like yours. Today, I have a special guest, my friend Sina. If you know anything about the dental industry, you see Sina everywhere. I see him at every event. I see him every day online, especially on LinkedIn. They always have really cool marketing, different things that they're doing. We were just talking about some of the campaigns that they're doing over there at Zentist. And I'm excited to learn from him today because he's providing not only education, software, and services that help dental offices just like yours, but they're really leveling up the industry from an educational standpoint. He's going to talk about his boot camp and just how he can help your office really take things to the next level. So Sina, thanks so much for coming on today.
Gary, it's my pleasure and an honor to be on your podcast.
Absolutely, man. I'm really excited. So let's start here. I really would love to hear people's entrepreneurial journey. And I know you have a serious entrepreneurial streak because I always see you leveling up. You're always doing the next thing, the next big thing. And so tell me a little bit about your story and how you got to where you're at today.
Sure. So back in 2005, I was graduating from a marketing program out of all programs, Gary, so you'll be able to relate to this. And, early on in my life, I've had a lot of family friends that went into medicine. And I had always felt like that's a great profession as far as making an impact on people's lives. And it ain't something bad, but I never saw myself, bedside. And so in the back of my mind, including when I was in high school, I had the thought of going to dental school. And I couldn't fathom, taking on a $500,000 debt load and not actually making, great income right until my 30s. And so I was considering all the options that were available to me. And just coincidentally, I had a professor that had introduced me to a healthcare IT startup back in 2005 that was looking for a marketing manager. And I ended up working about 20 to 30 hours in the beginning and then full time for this company. And within my first 2 weeks, they sent me off to a conference called HIMSS. It's one of the largest healthcare.
And what kind of company was it? It was a dental office, you said?
No, health tech. So nothing, nothing
tech.
to do nothing to do
so like
with
SaaS product. It was like a SaaS product, something like
exactly. Yeah. So on the hospital and health system side of the healthcare industry, right, there's a lot of organizations that will deploy radiology information systems, picture archiving and communication systems. So this healthcare IT startup was selling their software and their technology to large hospitals and health systems throughout Canada and the United States. And so I had the opportunity to start hitting the road at the age of 20, going to these conferences. And when I was there, I was getting exposed to the C-suite of a lot of these organizations. And when I saw that, A, it was highly complex from a technology standpoint, but B, if you could actually implement these systems, you could have a significant impact on reducing waste, right, and kind of saving resources. And so for me, it was kind of at first sight, I was in love with the whole opportunity because I felt like technology was obviously advancing, healthcare had to catch up, and to kind of be at the intersection of both would be a fantastic career opportunity. And so I decided to stick within the healthcare IT sector for several years up until 2012. And then in 2012, because I had a background working primarily at medical software companies, I was introduced to a consulting firm that had a dental, medical, as well as a veterinary division. And they didn't have an opening in the medical side of the business where my skill sets would probably shine the most. And they said, could you maybe go into the dental side for about 3 months and then we'll transition you into the medical.
So you're in dental by accident, right? Like it was just
pretty
kind
much
of
like everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. I ask everybody this question except for the dentist and the hygienist. Everybody else is here by accident. Like they're always like, yeah, and then I stumbled into it. So, and then the rule is you're not allowed to leave. So everybody who ends up in dental, like kind of ends up niching down and kind of doing what you're doing. So that's really neat. The other thing I find interesting, and this kind of a light bulb went on for me, my entrepreneurial brain always thinks top line, right? So like, how do I grow top line? Like marketing. And one of the things that you said there is like, if we can help people optimize from the inside, reducing waste, that's actually a really good thing too. That helps you grow and or helps the organizational grow. And I actually heard a really good example on this. I'd love your thoughts on it. Someone said, so if you add $1 to your top line, that dollar has to drop through all of your expenses. So you might end up with 20 cents, 18 cents, 30 cents, whatever, right? But when you cut $1 or when you figure out how to reduce waste, like what you're saying, and you save $1 at the bottom, that's all goes straight to profit. The whole thing, the whole dollar. So $1 top line is actually not as valuable as $1 bottom line in that scenario. Is that kind of how you think of it as well?
I've seen, startups run into trouble not managing cash flow. And I think that a lot of startups focus on what I call financial offense, which is really focusing on revenue. And revenue is important, right? But if anything in 2022, given investor sentiment and where the economy is going, there's an increasing emphasis on profitability. And so it's important to have, top line revenue, but if you're not managing your expenses accordingly, you can run out of cash. And that's, a dire situation, right? Especially for a company, let's say that's purely debt finance. And so from my perspective, I always felt like healthcare, required systems and optimization, because what's interesting with healthcare is that the patient doesn't always pay for that service, right? Like there's a payer involved in the mix. And like other retail businesses, it's not a direct, connection between the provider rendering the service and then the patient paying for it.
Yeah. So it's not like if you sell a pair of sneakers or a pair of tennis shoes, right? Like you're just trying to sell those for $100. The buyer either wants them and has $100 or they don't. Maybe they might pay for it in different ways, but dental's a lot more complicated than that when it comes to getting paid. And so and I want to jump into that, and I definitely want to cover that subject, but why did you went over to dental on accident, kind of someone moved you over there. Why did you decide to stay in the dental space?
So I had a really positive experience within my first 30 days working back in 2012 at this company. And it was primarily around a dentist entrepreneur that became my first client in the dental industry. And I felt that he highly valued the help that he was getting, because when I was dealing with hospitals and health systems, there was a lot of stakeholders, right? A lot of red tape. And you didn't always get that direct feedback that what you were doing was going a long way in terms of making an impact, just because there was also politics involved in some of these organizations. And I love the fact that you have a small business owner or a dentist entrepreneur who, at the end of the day, right, is running this business that's their own enterprise. And for many cases, they are the decision maker. And so for me, it was just that having a crazy positive experience in the beginning that got me addicted to it. Now, I'll tell you a story. When I was 18 years old, coming out of high school, I actually wrote my hygiene entrance exam. So when I was looking at the dental profession, one of the ideas that I had was if I go to hygiene school and I graduate from there, you can make income, right? You're making a difference in people's lives. And then from that, you can pivot into going to dental school. But when I showed up, there was about probably, 400 people there writing their exam. And I was one of only 2 male students that showed up. And so it occurred to me that I'm going to be a minority if I pursue this career. And I had a friend that was pursuing nursing. And amongst the group of friends that we had, there was some jokes that were flying around with regards to kind of, do you really want to do this for the next couple of years? And so one of the philosophies that I have is I fundamentally believe that if we want to fix a supply issue within dentistry, we have to get more male dental assistants and hygienists to feel comfortable going into the profession.
Oh, so, okay. I want to touch on that before we dive into the next part, because I think that's big. So right now we have a shortage of dental hygienists. And you're saying one of the reasons is it's all females. And so if there's more males that come into the industry, there's going to be more opportunity for for hygienic? Like we're going to have more hygienists just because you're going to have more bodies. Is that right?
Yeah, because if you look at the population in most countries, right, let's say it's roughly a 50-50 split between male and female. And if you look at the STEM field, right, the sciences and technology, what you historically saw in, for example, computer science was a huge shortage of software developers. And when we started addressing the fact that girls didn't want to pursue a career in computer science, we started to see some of that ease, and it's, still a problem, but it's not as dire of a problem because now we're getting girls that want to code. And so similarly, my view is that you want to get these students when they're young to aspire to work in the dental industry. And
nobody's doing that, right? Right now, there's no champion for that. Is that correct?
I haven't come across, I've been in the dental industry since 2012, and I've yet to come across a single organization that's addressing that.
Yeah, and that's a problem. And when I think about it, like, so everybody remembers the milk campaigns, right? Got milk. And so right. people drank milk, but who was paying for that? Well, it was all the dairy farmers pulled together and said, we need to fix this because if people stop drinking milk, we're going to have a problem for our industry. And so they marketed or they advertised to the general public as a whole collectively because it helped all of them, right? So we have a shortage of labor in dental, so we have to get people over. So there's some kind of collaboration that's going to have to help there. Now, one of the things I know that they did with the coding for the shortage of female of coding is they started to sponsor females to go to school for free. Women, if they want to go and learn how to code, like they would help give them scholarships, different things like that. And that didn't fix it, to your point, but it definitely got the ball rolling and got people interested that, hey, this is a interesting opportunity that I can get a scholarship for. Do you think something like that would ever happen in dental where now we have a lot of schools, 50% of the dentists that are coming out are now female, but now we need to do the same thing on the male side for dental hygienists?
Dental hygienist, dental assisting. Just the other day, I was grabbing a coffee and I ran into a couple of hygienists that were in their final year, right? And, female. And there's nothing that's wrong with that, but I fundamentally believe that if you get the male students going in and pursuing other careers because they have this label on hygiene or this label on dental assisting, there's no way you're going to fix the supply issue. And it doesn't matter if you have, better, let's say, payer coverage per se, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to increase access to oral health,
you need hygienists.
It comes down to the availability, and it also affects the cost, right? Because if you're paying a hygienist $50 an hour, well, that's going to get passed on to the patient or the payer.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great take. The first person I've heard say that, and it's such a simple thing, right? It's just a simple way to look at it, and I totally agree. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about how you've seen the dental industry change over the last couple of years. But I specifically want to hear about it from your point of view when it comes to revenue cycle management. So how has the dental industry changed, and then where are we going?
So when the industry was less consolidated, Gary, what you saw was the label, billing specialist or even an office manager, right, would do billing for a fraction of the time. And there was really no concept in dentistry of a central billing office because every practice would have an administrator or office manager that was not trained, right, on how to do insurance billing. They kind of learned it. I've had friends in the industry for years where they kind of grew up, right, getting thrown into a front desk of a clinic. And it was either the dentist that trained them or the previous office manager, but there was no certification program, right? No set of prerequisites to be an office manager. ADOM, I think, does a fantastic job now in training office managers. But historically, there was a lack of education. There's a lot of consultants in the industry teaching, practices around billing. But what's evolved since is as you see the acquisition of practices, right, and more practices banding together and working under the umbrella of a DSO, what has worked historically is not as effective, right, when you're managing 100 clinics. And so one of the trends that we've seen is a greater investment in infrastructure-related technologies so that these practices can collect more from payers, right? But the challenge you fundamentally have is the system of record, the practice management software in these offices. It was not designed, right, for insurance billing. It was really designed to check in and check out a patient.
Yeah.
And comes to claim submissions, you're submitting the claim to the clearinghouse. But the payers that are operating today, they're investing heavily in artificial intelligence, in machine learning. And we believe that the providers have to have technologies that allow them to play at the same level. And I feel that on the provider side of the industry, we've lacked that technology set.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that's been neglected for so long?
I think part of it is when you look at risk capital flowing into the dental industry, right, to fund software companies.
So risk, you said risk capital?
Venture capital. So
venture capital. Okay. So people who are investing in businesses.
Exactly. So let's say you and I, Gary, we start a company, right? And our thesis is we're going to build a revenue cycle management software company. The investors are going to look at what is the total addressable size of that market. They're going to look at who would buy this product. And prior to the consolidation of the market and the sophistication of the payers in terms of insurance denials, one could argue it's definitely a problem, right? But what percentage of the market would buy such a software? Whereas today, we're seeing the DSOs continuously look at how they're managing these claims. And so the market opportunity has blown up. Akin to, 20 years ago, right? Who would have thought online scheduling as a product category and patient engagement, text reminders would be such a massive opportunity, both in dental and medical. But over time, expectations of consumers change.
Yeah.
And so the expectation of the consumer today is if I go in for treatment, I want to know whether the patient portion of that estimate is correct. And in this day and age, if I don't have a good experience with price transparency, I'm going on Google or Yelp, right? And I'm writing a negative review. So I think there's way more attention on this issue because of the fact that consumers are a lot more savvy when it comes to looking for a dentist. And as they're going through that journey, they have way more avenues to complain about issues that they're having.
Yeah. And they ask a lot of questions. Like that's one of the top questions that people always ask is when they call is, how much is this going to cost? Can you give me a ballpark of what I'm looking at here? And that's a hard position to put an office in because of your exact point. It really depends on a whole bunch of different factors, and it's just not suitable for most people. So how do you then come in and help solve a lot of these problems?
So there's a lot of issues in revenue cycle management, all the way from insurance verification, right, to know what the patient's covered and not covered for. Looking at credentialing, right? Are you credentialing the providers correctly with the payer network? Claim submission. We get into then claim follow-up, aging, right? Posting. So we decided, let's pick an area that's highly repetitive and let's look at what is most inefficient, right, in the revenue cycle. And let's just solve that particular problem first. And the area that we identified to be extremely inefficient today is insurance payment posting. So the average practice or DSO, they're having to log in to dozens of payer portals to download the explanation of benefit statement. They're having to then interpret that explanation of benefit statement. And across payers, these EOBs are not all the same, right? So then you have to train the front desk person or somebody who's doing your billing to understand the nuances associated with each of these particular payers in terms of how they define and lay out their EOB. And then in addition to that, what we've noticed is a lot of offices, including when I was running my DSO, are getting checks in the mail, right? And many of them were not set up on EFTs and direct deposits. And so what we saw was an opportunity to build technology that allows them to eliminate the need to log into the portals, to aggregate all of their insurance payment data on one dashboard. And then on top of that, we have banking integration that allows us to reconcile those EFT and check deposits with the patient visits.
Got it. So I'm going to give you an example from the marketing world that I've seen, and I want you to give me the layman's example on the other side of what you do. Okay. So here's something that I realized, our company realized working with people who do large dental implants cases. So if you do large dental implant cases and you go to a marketing company, you say, hey, I want a bunch of leads. They can go out there and get you a bunch of leads. But for every about $4,000 to $5,000 you spend on marketing, you need a dedicated person spending at least 2 hours a day nurturing those leads. But no one knows that, right? And I'm not talking about just answering the phone. I'm talking about following up, confirming that they actually are going to come into the appointment. Did you answer all their questions? Did you verify their insurance? Did you get them qualified on the financing? There's and that has to happen over and over and over again. If you get 50 leads, you might end up actually only seeing 8 of those, 10 of those, 5 of those, depending on the kind of treatment that you're doing. And then someone, again, 2 hours every single day. Well, if you ask a dental office right now, do you have 2 hours a day to do that? The answer is going to be absolutely not. I don't have just a free 2 hours, 10 hours a week laying around. And the next question is do they have the skill set to even nurture a lead? You can't just take a random person out of the office and say, nurture these leads into the office, because they're not going to be able to actually say the right things at the right time to get those patients in. So here's what ends up happening. If you put that $5,000 into marketing without the lead nurturing system in, you will just blow your money, and it'll feel like a lot of activity, but you actually won't get anything in return. So in what you guys are doing for these offices, can you help me understand how, what's that 2 hours, or what's that time that you're saving that person, or how does that even look from the office level? Like, how much time are people actually putting into it? And then what are you saving?
So in one example, and we published the results of this particular case study, right? We work with a dental group called Great Lakes Dental Partners. There are roughly 40 practices across the US. And within less than 100 days, we were able to show a 53% increase in productivity on the insurance payment posting side of the RCM operations. And so the average...
So what was that percentage?
53%.
So time savings.
Time savings, correct.
So normally, for 40 offices, or let's just you do one office. So of those 40 offices, if you have just one of them, how much time is being invested? How much time is needed just to manage that if I don't use you guys? Is it an hour a day?
It depends on your payer mix. It depends on what percentage your clinic is fee for service versus insurance based, because we're focusing on insurance claims.
Mm-hmm.
But in the average practice, we see about 5 to 10 hours a week.
Okay.
That's because the other part of this is
that's
Gary,
so so you're saving right now. Somebody has people in the office that are focusing on the revenue and they're managing that, right? And you're coming in and you're cutting that in half. So you're looking at 5 to 10 hours per office per week.
Per office per week, because the other issue that happens is, you don't get 100% reimbursement, right, from payers. So when you look across the current list of payers that you have, what you want to look at is what is your current denial rate, right, by payer. And we are proactively managing your insurance denials because we have advanced analytics that will double click on a particular denial and tell you exactly why that denial happened. And more importantly, it gives you action items, right? So then you don't have to train that person at the front desk to necessarily know how to deal with this particular denial because it's this particular payer. We're giving you those action details on a screen in plain English.
Wow.
Which hasn't existed because historically, I can tell you that most dentists don't actually understand how insurance denials work.
Yeah.
So they're assuming that the office administrator, right, is on top of it and they're trying their best. Trust me. Yeah. The reality is that if you never trained them on managing these insurance denials, you didn't give them a playbook, how could you possibly expect that they're going to improve that KPI for you? And so from our perspective, we spend a lot of time doing, analysis on why these denials are happening. And then, we went in and built software code around it so that we could get around the issue of this happening again. So we're informing your claim submission process so that the next time you submit that claim to the payer, if you resolve this issue, you should not see a denial happening again.
Wow, that is huge. Okay, so that helps me really understand this and just the massive value that you guys are bringing. Now let's look at it from the other lens. I'm at like 5 or 10 offices. I haven't really thought about this much. I kind of have an office person that's kind of in charge of it, but like to your point, I don't have a playbook. I never gave him any training. I'm just kind of crossing my fingers and hoping that they're doing a good job with it. What is that? Give me like the horror story that you've seen when you go and open up the hood of an office like that. Like, what are they actually losing by approaching it that way?
There are timely limitations, right? Timely filing limitations for claims. And so one of the issues that you have is, and a horror story would be when you are not on top of these denials, you could have AR that's, in the six figures. In some cases, if you're a DSO, in the millions. So when you go to exit your DSO, you're getting paid a multiple of EBITDA. And to the earlier conversation that we had around why $1 at the top is not equivalent to $1 in bottom line profit, the multiple is on the measure of operating profitability, not top line revenue, because you're not a technology company or software company where somebody's paying you a multiple of revenue.
Yeah.
So on the exit, we see substantial money getting left on the table because the dental group has not effectively managed the revenue cycle on the insurance side. And as such, something like even an 8% denial rate can equate to a massive amount of money that is not going into their pocket if they decide to exit. Let's say they decided to sell to another DSO or do a private equity transaction. With regards to solo practices, I just find there's not enough visibility, right, on the part of the owner, because again, insurance is not something they're taught when they're in dental school. And then when they go into managing the clinic, right, as the business owner, they're relying on an office manager that is ill-equipped, doesn't have the necessary tools in order to effectively manage the revenue cycle. And the existing technologies that they historically inherit through a practice acquisition, right, were not meant to deal with the current problems that are stemming from these insurance claim denials.
Basically, it's crazy not to deal with this, right? Like if I'm just like, I'm going to get to this later, I'll give you an example. In marketing, I get why people don't want to hire a marketing company because right now you have labor shortages. So HR, you got to deal with that. That's way more important than marketing because you don't even have room to put more new patients, right? You have technology problems. So things aren't working with the PMS correctly, or you're just wasting a lot of energy between the DSO and the local practices or the regionals or whatever, right? So you got to get that in order because if you start spending money on marketing, again, it can just go down this black hole of nothingness if technology isn't squared away. So marketing's kind of down the list. Where in what you're doing, where do you recommend the people focus on this? Is this something like I should be taking care of today? Or is this something that I'm taking care of down the road a little?
I think it's going to get more problematic, right? The longer that you wait to set up the systems, because again, if you went to any of the payer conferences in 2022, there's not a single payer, a national payer that's not investing in AI in 2023. Like it's in their budgets, they're all experimenting and they're all deploying systems.
And what does that mean exactly? So everybody, AI is like a huge buzzword, right? So some people are actually really have AI and other people have like, it's just a computer, right? They're doing basic stuff. Yeah. So no one, I feel like sometimes we use those words and then people are kind of, I get lost in the sauce. So I'm assuming other people do too.
Sure.
So what does that mean? They're investing in AI. What does that mean?
So you submit a claim, it comes with an X-ray, right? You attach an X-ray and the payer can use computer vision, for example, to view that image and determine, was this X-ray submitted already and associated with another patient, which they may, determine it's fraud, like you're submitting an X-ray twice. They can look at that X-ray and determine, was this procedure necessary? So before, if a claim was expensive to review, they may just pay it, right? Today, it's getting cheaper and cheaper to review the claim using technology, which means that there's a greater opportunity for them to either pay the claim automatically, auto adjudication, or to deny it and then force you to then submit an appeal to convince them as to why the claim should be paid.
And that's where you guys come in to support around that, right?
And so where we come in is we're not a computer vision AI company. but we're using a combination of OCR, machine learning, and some other technologies to take the insurance payment data that resides in EOBs and ERAs, and we're basically helping you bucket the denials in various categories so that you're able to better manage them and get ahead of them.
So basically, so if, and again, this is for somebody who's never worked in a dental office, so bear with me. There's basically an arms race. The insurance companies are beefing up, so they have technology on their side, so they can say, "No, we're not going to pay that because that's not what you should have done right there." And then if the offices are not trying to keep up, then you're really just at the mercy of whatever they say. So it's like almost like an arms race that's going on right now.
And by the way, the payers are going to pay on the correct claims, right? But before, if it cost them $43 to review that claim, and the claim was $38, right? Like it didn't make economic sense to have a human review it. Now with technology, they can review way more claims, which means that they can pay out claims much faster, but they can also, on the other end, they can deny claims much faster.
And in claims, they can also deny claims that they were to never even touch before, to your point.
Right. Because again, it was not cost effective, right, to have a clinical reviewer review that particular claim and deny it. And so from our perspective, there's a benefit to payers investing in this technology, but then there's also a downside for the providers in that if you were historically getting paid on claims that could have been disputed, this will open up a whole can of worms, right? And for the providers that are not, aware of how this could affect their bottom line, I think they're going to get caught off guard. And going into 2023, the payers are looking at managing their OpEx just as much as practices are. And if they're looking at, for example, how they're staffing their call center, right, they're going to want to use more automation to get ahead of these inquiries. And so from that perspective, what are you able to do on your side as a provider to be on the same playing field as them as far as response times and as far as being able to, as soon as they deny the claim, right, submit an appeal for the appropriate reasons.
Got it. Okay. And then I know you have a boot camp coming up around this because it's not simple, right? There's not like, here, take this thing and download it on your phone and press go, and it kind of does it for you. It's complex. It is something that's complicated, and there's a lot of education that comes along with it as well because you're learning both sides of the fence. You're not just learning what you need to understand about insurance on your side, but you need to understand what the insurance companies are doing and how they're starting to arm themselves and how they're going to approach the problem. So you guys have a boot camp that dives into that. Tell us a little bit about the boot camp and tell us how that works for offices.
Sure. So we had our first revenue cycle management boot camp for DSOs back in March of this year, 2022. We're hosting a second boot camp January 11th to the 13th, 2023 in Las Vegas. And the goal of this boot camp is to bring together revenue cycle management professionals that work in operations, finance, and discuss, the best practices as it pertains to topics ranging from credentialing to claim submissions to managing your AR. We're bringing payers into the conference so that they can share from their perspective where they see the industry going. And historically, there has been payer-specific conferences, but those conferences are heavily focused when it comes to their agenda on covering topics that the payers care about, right? Not what's front and center for the providers. And so this is the first event, initiative in the industry where we're bringing together DSOs. And when I say DSOs, we have everybody from Select Dental Management to Lightwave Dental to Gen 4 Dental Partners to Great Lakes Dental Partners.
So what's like the biggest office that's there? 50 locations? Is that about?
Affordable Care, which is a couple of hundred offices.
Wow. Okay. And then what's the smallest office that would be there?
About 5. I would say 5 practices is kind of the range. But if you're a dentist entrepreneur and you're,
if you're going to grow
to build and grow, like you're welcome to attend. And the agenda is really focused on people, process, and technology. So we spend a lot of time discussing what is the appropriate technology stack, right, for building an effective revenue cycle. And so we have, for example, Dave Trent is CEO of Planet DDS. We have a number of leaders within their own respective industries that are, I'm sorry, when I said Planet DDS, I actually meant Orthify. So Dave is the CEO of Orthify, but we also have Eric, who's the CEO of Planet DDS.
Yep, I had him on a podcast. Great guy.
Yeah, great guy. So he's going to be there. We have all of the clearinghouses, major clearinghouses, including Dental Exchange, Vine Dental, and Change Healthcare, also represented. I mean, where else can you meet the top 3 clearinghouses in the industry on the same day, right? So if you have any burning
how do the
questions,
clearinghouses play into this? How does that work?
Great. So great question, Gary. So the way I think about the role of the clearinghouse is this. Payers have certain technologies and systems set up, right? And you as a provider have to submit a claim in the format that they can digest. And the importance of the clearinghouse is that they play an important role in taking the claim that's submitted and ensuring that it's in the format that the payer can actually process. And then when the payer kicks out data, the role of the clearinghouse is to provide better data structure for the provider to then interpret that information. Now, there is a gap between where the clearinghouses sit and where you have your practice management software, in the sense that, where Zentist comes in is we're filling the gap that exists in terms of the technology infrastructure between the practice management software and the clearinghouse. And we're trying to make it, from a user interface standpoint, much more simpler for the individuals that work at the DS or the practice, right, to be able to manipulate the information that they're getting into the format that they need in order to do things like reporting and analytics, and utilize that information to be much more proactive on the insurance revenue cycle. So we see the clearinghouses as an integral partner, right, in all of this.
Yeah.
That's why we're bringing them together. Unlike, some companies that will say insurance sucks, we actually think payers are an important part of the ecosystem. When you have double-digit inflation, right, real inflation, you have consumers, frankly, that cannot afford to pay out of pocket for treatment. And so, yes, membership plans, there's a role for that. But a lot of the patients that I talk to say, I don't want to be married to this practice because I don't even know the provider.
Yeah.
So if I sign up for the membership plan, can I go to another clinic and seek treatment? And that's the area that the insurance companies have figured out, that I think membership plans still have yet to figure out, in the sense that, are you providing the patient with greater mobility? If you're a DSO, the problem with the current model is that if I sign up for the membership plan in location A and I want to get treatment in location B, provider in location B is not compensated, or is compensated, but the one in location A isn't. Yeah. And so there's opportunities everywhere for us to innovate. But we think that the best way to do so is by bringing these people in the same room together to discuss the fundamental challenges.
I love that. Okay, so a couple quick hitter questions for you. So I know that you're a huge entrepreneur. Like, again, you just have that entrepreneur spirit. And every time I talk to you, I'm always learning from you. I'm always learning from your posts. So I would love to know your top 5 either business books or podcasts that you're listening to right now.
You put me on a spot. Great question. So I am listening to your podcast. DSO Secrets has a great podcast. I love the podcast you and Tanner are doing, the Dental Rift podcast.
You want to come on there and argue with us anytime?
I would love to do
cool.
that.
We'll get you on there. Okay. I think you're going to talk to Tanner later. So tell Tanner, Gary said for me to pick a topic that we would disagree on. So I'd love to have like something that you and Tanner wouldn't agree on, and then I'll like play referee or something and ask the questions that I don't understand.
That would be great. And then in terms of business books, so like Michael Porter, a lot of the books that he's written on strategy, I found early on in my career to be very, very helpful.
What was like the top book from him?
Well, there's a Porter's 5 Forces, right? So like the first book that he wrote on that particular subject, I forget the exact title, but I remember it was a very informative book. There's the innovator's dilemma, which is really talking about how it's Clay Christensen. So discussing, when it comes to innovation, what is the current cycle for disruptive technology?
The Essential Guide to Competition and Strategy, is that the one?
For Michael Porter or?
Yeah, for Michael Porter.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to get that one.
An innovator's dilemma, it came out several years ago, but it's really a classic. And then lately I've been picking up more books on investment, like the markets, and what's happening, because everybody's kind of looking at the markets and they look at the volatility and are not really sure what to do.
When there's blood in the street, that's when you buy, right?
That's right. And then Ken Kaufman, by the way, just released his book.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, was excited to pick up a copy of that. And he obviously has been helping the DEO members, the Dentist Entrepreneur Organization, is currently the CEO of a DSO and was previously with Community Dental Partners. So I love books that basically are covering our industry now, because historically we lacked the content.
We had,
right?
we had to take from other industries and kind of duct tape it together to make it work for what we were doing and trying to do in dental. 100%. Okay, last two questions. If you had any superpower to help you in business, what would that superpower be?
I think it's quite simple. I mean, I would love to increase my emotional IQ. I think anytime you can better understand where the other person's coming from.
So mind reading?
Like, if you can say that, yeah. I mean, just being better at picking up on just the emotional cues.
That's a good one.
And I think for most people, like, they think I need, all these other superpowers, but the reality is, like, business at the end of the day is about trust.
Yep.
And where the majority of the issues happen, in my experience, is a lack of communication. So that's a
good one. I would take, and that used to be my pick, and then someone said teleportation. So that way I wouldn't have to fly and see, that's a good one, huh? Teleportation, because I could just, I would go to every event, be home by dinner, you know what I mean, every single night with my family, and then go to the next thing and go talk. So that would be mine. And then assuming that every single person in the dental space is listening and watching right now, what would you say to them?
I think we owe it to the patients. So like there's 40% of Americans that basically can't afford dental care. And what initially attracted me to the dental industry, besides the complex business problems and the upside of solving them, was that as a patient, I actually didn't access dental care until I believe I was about 20 years old.
Yeah.
And so I'm not the only one, by the way. Now, luckily, I didn't have major issues, but given the mouth-body connection and the research that's being done showing the link between oral health, right, periodontal disease, and cardiovascular disease, I believe that our profession can play a significant role in prevention. And so one of the problems that has not been solved, it's a massive problem, is you still have a issue with everybody being able to access care, and we need to make dentistry more affordable. So when I get into conversations online with people about DSOs, they're looking at it from the perspective of private equity, grabbing money, putting it into their bank account. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of how do we scale what you're doing in one location across 100 locations so that every American can afford to have access to the best care possible. And if we solve that, I believe fundamentally the number of hospital visits would go down, because to me, like, a lot of the diseases start in the mouth, right? And I think as time goes by, we're going to be able to show that with science.
Yeah, it's crazy how much medical, when you go to a doctor, not dental, but you go to like a GP, how much they just ignore the mouth and the gut. Like, it's not even talked about. So I come in and I have this problem. I had a problem. I had like a rash. I thought I was allergic to stuff. It was just foods. I was eating the wrong foods at the wrong times. And once I solved that, all my problems went away, but the doctors were not within 100 miles of that. They weren't even thinking, it wasn't even on the radar. And so it's just so interesting how we just miss some of that basic stuff. Even though we're super smart and we have a ton of technology, we also miss a lot of just basic things like that. And I totally agree with you. There's tons of opportunity there. Sina, if someone wants to learn more about what you guys are doing, which if you guys aren't if you guys haven't talked to Sina, and you own an office, so a lot of our offices that listen are like 3 to 5, 6 locations. If you haven't talked to Sina yet, talk to him. But if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in contact with you guys?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. So you can find me on LinkedIn, look up my name. Twitter, my handle is Better Dentistry. In addition, you can visit our website, which is www.zentist.io. So it's zentist.io. And you can get in touch with Gary. He'll forward you my contact information. And my email address is Sina, my first name, Amiri, my last name, @zentist.io.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot. This helps me understand what you guys are doing. And I know this is going to be an ongoing thing. And I really look forward to your boot camp. I'm not able to make it to this one, but I'm definitely going to eventually make it to one of your boot camps and just to come learn, because I think what you guys are providing is amazing for the community. And I love the way you're just trying to level up and help other people understand how they can solve this problem of revenue. And it's one of the biggest things you can do for your office, because if you don't get your revenue squared away, then you can't really help the patients the way that you want. So thanks so much for doing what you do.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's been a pleasure.